Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into a gripping and haunting story about a man who became consumed by jealousy and obsession, leading him down a path of no return. This is not just another crime story, it's a warning about the destructive power of unchecked emotions. Stay tuned until the end as we unravel every twist and turn of this tragic case. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more captivating stories. From the outside, Lucas Reinhardt and his wife, Anna, seemed to have it all. Lucas, a successful software engineer, was climbing the ranks at a prestigious tech company, while Anna, a talented interior designer, was making waves in the design world. Their home, a picturesque house with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence, stood as a symbol of their seemingly perfect life. Friends and neighbors admired their success, their chemistry, and their apparent happiness. But beneath the surface, something much darker was brewing, something that would soon unravel everything they had built together. For Lucas, the cracks in his facade began with a curiosity, a quiet yearning he hadn't shared with anyone. His fascination started innocently enough: late-night searches for ways couples could reignite passion in their marriage. But as his explorations deepened, Lucas became captivated by a particular fantasy, the thought of watching his wife with another man. The very idea stirred something primal within him, an urge that both excited and terrified him. It was a secret he guarded fiercely, ashamed of the intensity of his desires. Night after night, Lucas found himself drawn to forums and articles discussing cuckolding, where he read countless stories of couples who had explored this taboo. Each time, he was pulled further into this hidden world, the thrill growing stronger with every new discovery. But the more obsessed he became, the more distant he grew from Anna. She noticed his late nights at the computer, his distracted glances during their conversations, the way he seemed to be drifting away from her, emotionally and physically. Anna was no fool. She knew something was wrong. Her once attentive and present husband was now always somewhere else mentally, if not physically. One evening, unable to ignore it any longer, she confronted him, asking if work was the issue, if stress had overwhelmed him. Lucas, cornered and exhausted from hiding, decided to come clean. He knew it was a risk, but the weight of his secret had become unbearable. Sitting across from her at their kitchen table, a bottle of wine between them, Lucas nervously confessed. He told her everything: his late-night explorations, his growing obsession with the fantasy, his need to experience it. He watched Anna's face closely, expecting disgust or perhaps anger. But to his surprise, she didn't recoil. Instead, she listened intently, processing his words with a calm that unnerved him. When Anna finally spoke, it wasn't with judgment, but with curiosity. She asked questions, trying to understand what it was about the fantasy that appealed to him. Though she had her reservations, Anna admitted that the idea of being desired by someone else, the center of another man's attention, had its own strange allure. Her response shocked Lucas, but it also thrilled him. He hadn't expected her to even entertain the notion, let alone express any intrigue. That night marked a turning point in their marriage. What had once been a hidden, shameful desire for Lucas was now out in the open. They had crossed a line, and neither of them fully understood the consequences of what would come next. As they sat together, contemplating the future, they had no idea that this shared curiosity would set them on a dangerous path, one that would lead to jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. With the unspoken tension between them lifted, Lucas and Anna began to discuss the possibilities. They set boundaries, talking through every scenario with care. It was all theoretical at first, a fantasy shared between the two of them, something that might never materialize. They promised each other that no matter what happened, they would always put their marriage first. It seemed safe, manageable, just an exploration of desires in the privacy of their conversations. But soon, curiosity turned to action. They began searching for the right man, someone who could fulfill their fantasy without threatening their relationship. Lucas was meticulous in his approach, wanting to make sure whoever they invited into their lives would respect the boundaries they had set. They discussed countless profiles, trying to find someone discreet, intelligent, and understanding. It was more difficult than they had anticipated. Then Anna met Ethan Cross at a gallery opening downtown. Tall, charismatic, with piercing blue eyes, Ethan was the owner of a well-known art gallery, and he moved effortlessly through the city's elite social circles. Anna was immediately drawn to his charm and sophistication. They spent the evening chatting about art, design, and life, and when Ethan casually mentioned being open to new experiences, Anna felt a spark of excitement. Later that night, Anna told Lucas about her encounter with Ethan, describing his magnetic personality and the way he had flirted with her. Lucas listened intently, his pulse quickening as Anna relayed every detail. It was the first time they had found someone who intrigued them both. Lucas, despite the knot of anxiety forming in his stomach, encouraged Anna to see if Ethan might be interested in their arrangement. The idea of his fantasy coming to life was both thrilling and terrifying. Over the next few weeks, Anna and Ethan met for coffee several times, under the guise of discussing art projects. Each meeting left Anna buzzing with excitement, and every time she came home, she shared every moment with Lucas. He found himself more and more consumed by the idea of watching his wife with another man. The boundaries they had discussed began to blur in his mind as his obsession grew. Finally, after a particularly flirtatious encounter with Ethan, Anna decided it was time to bring up the idea. To her relief, Ethan was intrigued. He had been involved in similar situations before and understood the delicacy required. With his agreement, they now had everything in place to take the next step, turning fantasy into reality. Neither Lucas nor Anna could have predicted how deeply this decision would change their lives. The night of the first encounter arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Lucas and Anna had spent weeks planning every detail, ensuring everything would go smoothly. From the dimmed lighting in their bedroom to the chilled bottle of expensive champagne, every moment had been carefully curated to match the intensity of the evening. Lucas couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation, though it was tinged with an undercurrent of uncertainty. At precisely 8 p.m., Ethan Cross arrived, looking impeccably polished in a tailored suit. He brought with him a bouquet of roses for Anna and a rare bottle of whiskey for Lucas, gestures that instantly impressed them both. The evening began innocently enough, with small talk and laughter in the living room. Ethan regaled them with stories from his life in the art world, his natural charm and wit putting everyone at ease. Anna, dressed in a sleek black dress, laughed at his jokes and playfully touched his arm, their chemistry palpable. From his armchair, Lucas watched them closely, feeling a growing mix of excitement and trepidation. The sight of his wife laughing, touching, and engaging with another man was both thrilling and unsettling. As the night progressed, the charged atmosphere between Anna and Ethan became more apparent. Every glance, every touch seemed to intensify the tension. Lucas's heart raced, knowing what was about to unfold. At last, Anna gave Lucas a knowing look, the signal. She took Ethan by the hand and led him upstairs. Lucas, a tumbler of whiskey still in his hand, followed behind them, feeling as though he were stepping into a dream. In the bedroom, the soft glow of candles and the scent of roses filled the air. Lucas settled into a corner chair, watching as his wife and Ethan kissed for the first time. It was surreal. What had once been just a fantasy, whispered between them in the dark, was now happening right in front of him. The intensity of it all hit him like a wave, the passion, the vulnerability, and the raw reality of watching Anna in someone else's arms. As Ethan and Anna moved to the bed, their bodies intertwining, Lucas felt a potent mix of emotions wash over him: excitement, arousal, but also something darker, something he hadn't anticipated. Jealousy. The encounter itself was everything they had imagined: intense, passionate, and uninhibited. Lucas couldn't tear his eyes away, even as his emotions churned inside him. He had gotten what he wanted, but as the night wore on, that nagging sense of unease refused to disappear. After it was over, they all lay in silence, the room heavy with the aftermath. Ethan left shortly after, promising to stay in touch, and Lucas and Anna were left alone to process what had just transpired. As they lay in bed that night, Anna seemed invigorated, eager to talk about the experience. But Lucas, despite the outward satisfaction of seeing his fantasy fulfilled, couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between them. A door had been opened, one that they might not be able to close. In the days following their first encounter with Ethan, life at home took on a strange new rhythm. The tension that had existed between Lucas and Anna before their exploration into this uncharted territory seemed to dissipate, replaced with a sense of excitement and openness. They talked about the experience constantly, dissecting every detail. Anna, in particular, seemed more alive than she had been in years. Her excitement over the night with Ethan was palpable, and she frequently brought up the possibility of seeing him again. For Lucas, the aftermath was more complicated. On the surface, he had gotten exactly what he wanted, his fantasy had been brought to life. But beneath the satisfaction, there was a growing sense of unease. The thrill was undeniable, but the jealousy that had crept in during that night refused to fade. He found himself replaying the scene in his head over and over, each time feeling that uncomfortable knot tightening in his chest. Despite these internal conflicts, they didn't stop. In fact, they arranged more meetings with Ethan. What began as a once-in-a-while indulgence quickly became a regular occurrence. Ethan slipped seamlessly into their lives, and with each encounter, the boundaries Lucas and Anna had initially set began to blur. Lucas, who had been content to watch from a distance, found himself drawn closer to the action. Sometimes, he joined in, but even then, the dynamic of power and control in their bedroom grew increasingly complex. As the weeks passed, Ethan became more than just a third party in their sexual encounters. He started spending time with them outside of those moments: dinners, art exhibitions, even weekend getaways. The three of them formed an unlikely trio, and Lucas found himself enjoying Ethan's company, even when they weren't engaged in anything sexual. Ethan was witty, charming, and effortlessly fit into their social circles. But as much as Lucas liked him, he couldn't ignore the growing attachment between Ethan and Anna. It started with little things: the way Anna's eyes lit up when Ethan was around, or how she dressed up more frequently, even on days when they didn't have plans. She began texting Ethan more often, sharing private jokes and planning outings without consulting Lucas. The thrill of their initial arrangement had morphed into something different, something Lucas hadn't anticipated. He could feel Anna slipping away from him, her attention and affection increasingly directed toward Ethan. One evening, after Anna had spent the day out, Lucas came home early to find her on the phone, speaking in a low, intimate tone. When she noticed him, she quickly ended the call, claiming it was just a client. But Lucas wasn't convinced. His suspicions, once small and nagging, began to grow into something more consuming. He started checking her phone when she wasn't looking, scrutinizing her text messages, and even considered following her on her outings. As Lucas spiraled deeper into paranoia, he tried to reassert control. He suggested they take a break from seeing Ethan, perhaps go on a romantic vacation together, just the two of them. But Anna was resistant, finding reasons to delay or avoid the conversation entirely. The more he pushed, the more distant she became. It was clear to Lucas that he had started something he no longer had control over. The fantasy that had once excited him now felt like a nightmare, and he was terrified of losing Anna to Ethan, not just sexually, but emotionally. As the summer months wore on, Lucas's paranoia and jealousy reached a boiling point. Every glance between Anna and Ethan, every inside joke, every unexplained absence sent him into a tailspin. What had started as a thrilling exploration of a fantasy now felt like a slow unraveling of his marriage. Lucas could feel Anna drifting further from him, and his once well-organized, successful life had become a chaotic mess of doubt, suspicion, and fear. It all came to a head one hot evening in July. Lucas had planned a romantic dinner at home, hoping to rekindle the connection between him and Anna. He left work early, bought her favorite wine, and spent hours preparing an elaborate meal. But as the sun began to set, Anna was nowhere to be found. He called her repeatedly, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The candles burned low, and the carefully prepared food grew cold on the table. The clock ticked past midnight, and still, Anna hadn't returned. When the front door finally creaked open, Lucas stood in the kitchen, tense and exhausted. Anna stumbled in, her hair disheveled, lipstick smudged, and the faint scent of Ethan's cologne clinging to her. Lucas's worst fears crystallized in that moment. He didn't need her to say anything, the truth was written all over her face. The confrontation was immediate and explosive. Lucas, fueled by hours of anxious waiting and far too much wine, unleashed all the rage and fear he had bottled up. He accused Anna of falling in love with Ethan, of making him a fool, of destroying their marriage. Anna, caught off guard and still under the haze of her evening, tried to deflect at first. She insisted she had been at a client meeting and that her phone had died. But Lucas wasn't buying it. He pressed harder, and eventually, under the weight of his relentless questioning, she admitted the truth: she had been with Ethan. The confession hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. Hearing it spoken out loud was a reality he had feared but hoped never to face. As he stared at Anna, her tear-streaked face only inflamed his sense of betrayal. In that moment, everything they had built together, every shared dream, every laugh, every promise, felt like a lie. "How could you?" Lucas's voice was low, dangerous, trembling with barely controlled rage. "End it? Now," he demanded, his eyes locking with hers. But Anna, her own anger rising, pushed back. "This was your idea," she shot back, her voice filled with bitterness. "You wanted this. You brought him into our lives. You can't control how I feel." The argument escalated, both of them hurling words they would later regret. Lucas, consumed by anger and jealousy, couldn't hold back. He smashed a wine glass against the wall, the sound of shattering glass filling the room. Anna, startled by the sudden act of violence, retreated to the guest bedroom and locked the door behind her. Lucas spent the rest of the night on the couch, his mind racing, replaying every moment over and over. His emotions were a violent storm: hurt, betrayal, rage. But underneath it all was one singular, unshakable thought: Ethan had to be dealt with. Over the next few days, Lucas became consumed by the idea. What had started as fantasies of revenge during his sleepless nights evolved into something darker. He thought about confronting Ethan, of making him pay for what he had done, for what he had taken from him. It wasn't just about Anna anymore. It was about control, about reclaiming the life that Ethan had intruded upon. On August 15th, a humid and oppressive day, Lucas made up his mind. This was the day he would put an end to it all. He woke early, his heart racing with a strange sense of calm determination. He showered, dressed in his sharpest clothes, and methodically packed a gym bag. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was the heavy wrench he had taken from the garage days earlier, the same tool he had once used to fix their home, now chosen for a far more sinister purpose. He waited for Anna to leave for work, barely acknowledging her as she rushed out the door. As soon as she was gone, Lucas grabbed his bag, got into his car, and drove to Ethan's art gallery. He parked across the street, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he watched people come and go. The heat of the day was oppressive, but Lucas hardly noticed. His focus was singular, his mind numb to everything but the task ahead. Hours passed. Lucas sat in his car, his body tense, waiting. As closing time approached, he saw Ethan emerge from the gallery, locking the door behind him. Lucas grabbed the gym bag and crossed the street, his footsteps heavy with purpose. "Ethan," he called, his voice cold and steady. Ethan turned, surprise flickering across his face before settling into a wary smile. "Lucas," he greeted him cautiously, "this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" In that moment, something inside Lucas snapped. Without a word, he swung the gym bag, the wrench inside connecting with Ethan's side with a sickening thud. Ethan staggered back, his face twisted in shock and pain. But Lucas wasn't done. The rage that had been festering for weeks, the jealousy and humiliation, all exploded in a blind fury. He swung again and again, the wrench crashing into Ethan's body as he tried in vain to defend himself. When it was over, Lucas stood over Ethan's motionless body, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the wrench slick with blood in his trembling hand. The realization of what he had done crashed over him like a wave. He had killed a man. He had destroyed his life in a desperate, futile attempt to save it. Operating on autopilot, Lucas dragged Ethan's body into the alley behind the gallery and hid it behind a dumpster. He wiped down the door handle and any surface he might have touched before returning to his car. The adrenaline was wearing off now, replaced with an overwhelming sense of dread. As he drove home, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing away the blood on his hands but doing nothing to cleanse the guilt that would soon consume him. The hours following the murder passed in a surreal blur for Lucas. As the reality of what he had done began to sink in, panic gripped him tightly. He stumbled back into his car, driving home with shaking hands and a hollow feeling in his chest. The rain that had started as a drizzle was now pouring down, washing away the blood on his hands but doing nothing to cleanse the guilt. His mind raced as he thought of what to do next. He had killed a man, and soon enough, someone would notice Ethan was missing. When he arrived home, Lucas immediately went to the bathroom, violently emptying the contents of his stomach into the sink. The weight of his actions felt unbearable. As he splashed water on his face, staring at his pale reflection in the mirror, his thoughts turned to Anna. She couldn't know. Not yet. Not until he figured out how to handle the fallout. He had to act normal, had to pretend like everything was still under control. Operating on sheer autopilot, Lucas set about cleaning up. He scrubbed the car meticulously, removing any traces of blood or dirt from his encounter with Ethan. Then, he gathered the clothes he had been wearing and burned them in the fire pit in their backyard, watching the flames consume the last remnants of the night. His stomach churned with anxiety, but he forced himself to stay focused. There could be no mistakes. By the time Anna returned home from work, Lucas had composed himself enough to greet her with a calm, forced smile. She seemed preoccupied, barely acknowledging his presence as she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. Lucas, still reeling inside, made casual conversation, suggesting they order takeout and watch a movie. His outward appearance was unnervingly composed, but his mind was racing, concocting a story to tell when Ethan's disappearance was inevitably discovered. As the days passed, news of Ethan's absence began to spread. 2 days after the murder, a local news outlet reported that Ethan Cross, a prominent figure in the Portland art scene, had gone missing. His last known appearance had been at his gallery, just before closing time. Lucas read the article with a growing sense of dread. It was only a matter of time before the police would start asking questions. Sure enough, the investigation kicked off quickly. Detective Elena Rossi, a seasoned investigator with Portland's Homicide Division, was assigned to the case. Her sharp instincts told her that Ethan's disappearance was more than a simple missing person case. There was something off about the details. No one saw him leave the gallery, and no one had any idea where he could have gone. As the police began interviewing Ethan's friends and business associates, it wasn't long before they uncovered his connection to Lucas and Anna. When the detectives came to question Lucas, he had prepared himself. He expressed shock and sadness at Ethan's disappearance, carefully reciting the story he had rehearsed. He claimed to have been home that evening, catching up on work and doing some yard work. To support his alibi, he showed the detectives a small cut on his hand, which he explained away as an accident while pruning rose bushes, a cut that, in reality, had come from his struggle with Ethan. Detective Rossi, however, wasn't entirely convinced by Lucas' calm demeanor. Something about him seemed too rehearsed, too perfectly aligned with the story he was telling. She made a mental note to dig deeper into Lucas' background and to keep an eye on him as the investigation continued. Meanwhile, Anna was growing more distant, her grief over Ethan's disappearance deepening with each passing day. She threw herself into work, avoiding the stilted silences and awkward exchanges that now characterized her marriage to Lucas. Though Lucas had seemed more attentive in the days after Ethan's disappearance, something didn't sit right with her. His overly composed nature and insistence that everything would be fine only heightened her suspicions. The more Anna thought about it, the more she revisited the events leading up to Ethan's last day. She remembered Lucas' growing jealousy, his desperate pleas for her to end the affair, and his increasingly erratic behavior. Her mind began to put the pieces together, though she couldn't bring herself to believe what was slowly becoming obvious: Lucas was hiding something. And whatever it was, it terrified her. As Ethan Cross's disappearance sent shockwaves through Portland's art scene, the police wasted no time launching a full-scale investigation. Detective Elena Rossi, known for her tenacity and ability to solve even the most puzzling cases, quickly zeroed in on the last people to have close contact with Ethan: Lucas and Anna Reinhardt. The initial interviews with the couple seemed straightforward, with both expressing shock and sadness over Ethan's sudden vanishing act. But Rossi was a veteran investigator, and something about Lucas' demeanor struck her as off. He was too composed, too rehearsed, as if his grief was something he wore like a mask. As the investigation continued, cracks began to appear in Lucas' carefully constructed alibi. Detective Rossi ordered a thorough review of security footage from the area around Ethan's gallery. Footage from a nearby cafe caught Ethan locking up the gallery on the evening of his disappearance, but there was no footage of him ever leaving. More importantly, the footage captured a figure matching Lucas' description loitering near the gallery late that night, a detail that contradicted Lucas' claim that he had spent the evening at home. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A homeless man, known to frequent the alleyways behind the gallery, approached the police with a chilling story. He claimed that on the night Ethan vanished, he had seen a man carrying a heavy-looking gym bag enter the alley behind the gallery. His description of the man fit Lucas perfectly. The man hadn't realized the significance of what he had seen until he heard about Ethan's disappearance on the news. This new information sent the investigation in a darker direction, one that Detective Rossi had already been considering. Armed with the homeless man's testimony and the conflicting alibi, Detective Rossi began piecing together a timeline. She pulled traffic camera footage, combed through credit card receipts, and interviewed anyone who might have seen Lucas near the gallery. What she found began to paint a disturbing picture. Lucas had been lying. His car had been spotted near the gallery just before Ethan was last seen alive, and his cell phone records showed him in the vicinity of the gallery, despite his earlier claims of being at home. The mounting evidence put Lucas in a precarious position, but the most damning discovery came when Detective Rossi executed a search warrant on the Reinhardt home. The police combed through the house with forensic precision, leaving no stone unturned. It was in the attic, tucked away behind a pile of old boxes, that they found the final piece of the puzzle, the wrench. Still stained with Ethan's blood, the wrench had been hastily hidden, as if Lucas couldn't bring himself to fully dispose of the murder weapon. The sight of the blood-stained tool sent a chilling realization through the investigation team. Lucas had killed Ethan in a fit of rage, and he had tried to cover it up, but he hadn't been careful enough. The traces of blood on the wrench were unmistakable. Forensic tests confirmed that the DNA belonged to Ethan, and with that, Lucas' fate was sealed. But Detective Rossi wasn't satisfied with just the physical evidence. She wanted to understand the psychology behind the crime. She dug deeper into Lucas's online history, uncovering an unsettling trail of obsessive behavior. There were hours of late-night searches, articles about jealousy, forums discussing power dynamics in relationships, and most disturbingly detailed logs of surveillance on Anna and Ethan. Lucas had been watching them for weeks, tracking their movements, and documenting every interaction. The picture was now horrifyingly clear. Lucas had been consumed by jealousy and a need for control, and when he felt he had lost both, he snapped. The day of Lucas' arrest arrived under a shroud of gray skies and heavy rain, as if the city itself were mourning what had transpired. Detective Rossi and her team arrived at the Reinhardt home with a quiet determination. Lucas was sitting in the living room, staring vacantly at the television, when they entered. He didn't resist, didn't argue. It was as if he had known this moment was coming for weeks. As the cold handcuffs snapped around his wrists, a strange calm seemed to settle over him. The game was finally over. The arrest made headlines almost immediately, thrusting Lucas into the spotlight in a way he never could have imagined. The media had a field day with the details of the case: a successful man undone by his own jealousy, a secret affair, a brutal murder. But for Detective Rossi, it wasn't the media frenzy that mattered. It was justice for Ethan, and making sure Lucas would never hurt anyone again. At the trial, the courtroom was packed with spectators and reporters eager to witness the downfall of Lucas Reinhardt. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, walking the jury through the timeline of events, from Lucas' growing obsession to the fateful night he took Ethan's life. They presented the wrench as the murder weapon, its bloodstains a silent testament to the violence of the act. The testimony of the homeless man and the footage from the traffic cameras were damning, but it was the forensic evidence that delivered the final blow. There was no way for Lucas to explain away the wrench, the DNA, or the hours of digital breadcrumbs he had left behind. Anna, devastated by the revelations of her husband's actions, took the stand with trembling hands. Her testimony was heartbreaking: a woman torn between guilt and grief, who had watched the man she once loved spiral into something dark and unrecognizable. She spoke of the days leading up to Ethan's disappearance, Lucas' strange behavior, and the fear she had felt as she realized he was capable of far more than just jealousy. Lucas, sitting stoically at the defense table, had little to say in his own defense. His attorney tried to paint him as a man who had been driven to the edge by emotional distress, but it was clear to everyone in the courtroom that this was more than just a moment of madness. Lucas had planned the murder, had obsessed over it, and had executed it with cold precision. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Lucas to 25 years to life in prison, and as the gavel fell, the weight of his actions seemed to settle heavily on Lucas' shoulders. There was no victory in this moment, no redemption. Only the cold, stark reality of what he had done. For Anna, the end of the trial brought little relief. She filed for divorce shortly after the sentencing, unable to live with the memory of what had happened. She sold their house, packed up her life, and moved far away, hoping to leave the pain and tragedy behind. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of how everything had gone so wrong. In prison, Lucas was left to face his demons. The fantasies that had once thrilled him were now twisted nightmares, haunting him every night. He had lost everything: his freedom, his wife, his life, all because of a jealousy that had spiraled out of control. The very desire that had once seemed harmless had consumed him, and now, he had nothing left but the echo of his actions. The story of Lucas Reinhardt, Anna, and Ethan Cross became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of how unchecked emotions can destroy lives. And for Lucas, the prison walls that surrounded him were not just a physical punishment, but a reminder of the dark path he had chosen, one from which there was no return. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you were captivated by this true crime story and want to see more thrilling cases, please hit the like button to support us. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who also loves real-life crime stories and leave a comment below with your thoughts on the case. Be sure to subscribe to the Dark Crime Mysteries channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest gripping cases that you won't want to miss. Thank you for your support.